everyone, and welcome back to the Grateful Not Greedy podcast. My name is Chris, and I am here with my very fishy co-host, and her name is
Rachel. I hope I'm not too fishy.
I didn't say you smell like a fish. I just said maybe you're fishy. So, today, Rach, I think a little minute ago, I don't remember what it was. You sent me something that was really interesting and telling about the crabs. And not the crabs that a lot of people think I'd get your mind out of the gutter, not those crabs, just like the regular Maryland kind of crabs. And ironically, I'm going to Maryland next weekend, so the crabs are definitely on my mind. But you sent me a little thing talking about how if there's one crab in a bucket and he wants to get out, he'll just scurry himself out there and escape. But if you put more than one crab and a group of crabs in a bucket, that the other crabs will pull the crab down who's trying to, jump out. Like if one of them tries to go up the thing and they'll pull him back down. And you kind of got me thinking because, I'm not like this massive fisherman, but I have spent quite a bit of time in Maryland. I've spent quite a bit of time around crabs, and they don't put lids on the crab buckets because they don't have to. Because otherwise, if they had crabs running all over the place, they'd have lids on all these crab buckets. They don't. They just are buckets of crabs, sitting around. So, and that's before they're, your food, before they're like put on all the big plate. So I thought today would be a useful time as I'm preparing to go to Baltimore, Maryland, the great state of crabs, to talk about this phenomenon and especially how who we're around, how we set up our lives can really dictate if we're able to escape or if we're pulled down, or even if we're in that conversation of being pulled down by the other crabs. And by the way, who are these crabs? What are they? Why are they even doing that? Right? Because we're all
Right.
crabs. Like we all have equal opportunity and all that. So today, in honor of my trip to Maryland, let's talk about the crab mentality and the concept that, how do we as people be grateful, not greedy, grateful that someone else gets the promotion, grateful that someone else, gets the house they want, grateful that someone else, marries the whoever, right? Grateful that someone else wins the lottery. That's sometimes I think difficult to do for a lot of us. And so just framing grateful, not greedy, crab mentality style, and really also recognizing not only are you sometimes a crab who wants to escape, but do you find yourself also being one of those crabs who's pulling other people down, even if it's only incidentally?
Yeah. I mean, I think, me and nature and relating nature to us, like that's kind of like my thing. I always love what nature can teach us. There's so many important lessons. When this popped up, I was like, oh gosh, look at that. Because I had my lobster early on, like the
I know,
lobster,
that's what
right?
I said. You're my fishing.
I
You're
know.
my sea girl. You're my
I
mermaid.
know.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think overall, like I love seeing how the parallels run here because I do feel like especially we can talk from the teenager's perspective, we can talk from being in the corporate world, which I was in for a long time, and that whole idea of of women
Oh yeah,
it's like I feel like in the corporate world,
I agree.
women are in a bucket together and there's not enough
Yes,
room in the bucket. And
that's
so
right.
instead of all of us coming together so one person to help support someone so they can rise above,
Hmm.
we're all trying to pull her down because we feel like it's just such a limited opportunity. There's only one
Yeah.
seat at the top and I want it or she wants it or whatever. And it becomes that very kind of crab world and that little petri dish there, like in that world. I
Yeah.
think that this mentality exists and I find it so interesting that it exists naturally. So whether or not it was something it was taught or something innately in us, I have no idea. But I do believe that this topic is very interesting because it does start, in teenage years for girls a lot, and it carries
Yeah.
through. And then the question on top of that, as we dive into this is, and then so what if you are in the bucket? How do you get yourself out so
Well,
you don't have to be
if you're,
there?
one of the many crabs, yeah, exactly. How do you become
Yeah.
the one who escapes, or are you always going to get pulled down? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, how do you get the bucket? Is there a bucket out there with the crabs that everybody works together with? And how do we find that bucket?
Well, but
Right?
it's a good point because the point you're essentially asking is, are you around people who can help you climb, or are you, will you be one of those people who will help other people climb? Or are you around people who are pulling you back into the pot, either pulling you back into the pot, or by like peer pressure, you
Sure.
become part of the problem, if you will, by pulling someone else back into the pot. And even if you don't intend to do it, or even if it's not malicious, uh, I can just see so many examples coming up from this, like, kinda like, "Oh, well, who does she think she is?" "Oh, well, she's looking really fancy today," and, "Oh, well, she, got that new car," and, "Oh, well, she just, got a raise, and she just did a," it's kind of like when people are wealthy and that there's this idea that somehow they're undeserving
Oh,
because what? They might have worked really hard, and they might have worked 13, 14-hour days when I was just chilling at the you know, at the restaurant or something, having dinner, I don't know. But, there's just a lot of examples, I think, where we don't understand differentially what people are doing to get where they're going, or to earn what they have, or to get what they have, and even if it's just lucky, better lucky than good, I say it all the time, that good on them, good on them, and we just have this crab mentality, right? Which is
yeah.
where socially we're in, and there is, I'm sure, social behavioral science around this, right? Where
Sure.
almost like a gang behavior, right? Where we're in this gang of crabs, and it's conceptually the idea of undermining other success. It's almost like if they succeed, I can't. Talk about a scarcity mindset, right? The
Right.
idea is there's only one promotion, or there's only one firm, or there's only one this, and you have that competitive thing. I know we've talked other times, like I don't particularly love to golf with certain groups. And part of that is labeled in the fact that I just don't feel supported by certain, people when I golf with them, because I'm not a big golfer. We've established that many times on this podcast. But you almost don't even want to go out because you're feeling everyone's eyes on you, just waiting for your downfall, whether it's, just straight out jealousy, if people who are good at stuff like this, for sure it comes into, when you have people who are the goats in whatever industry they are. I mean, there's flat out jealousy, and then
No.
just competition when you're trying to collaborate and all that. And then just the idea of maybe even resentment. I think you could speak to this. I feel like this is kind of maybe one of the trigger points for you is maybe that resentment that people get of your growth. Like, it's almost
Mm.
not okay for you to be growing, or for you to be in that position, or for you to have, earned that, or for you to be there because, what, you worked hard, you did that. So that could come in this sense of, your friend saying something like, "Oh, Rachel, like, I don't know." People say it to me all the time, like, "Oh, you do so much. Why do you do so much? Why da 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 da?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Are you proud of
I'm
me? Is
just
there a
I
comment
know.
there? Like, I don't even know, right? I don't know.
Yeah.
I just not built that way,
I think,
right? So maybe
you
I'm the
know
crab trying to
yeah.
escape. So how about you just give me a boost and say like, "Hey, that's awesome. Go nursing school, right? You push me out of the pot, because it is, you feel like a hole. It's almost like a centrifugal force, like that when you're at the fair, there's that spinny ride, and it just gets going so fast, and what does it do? It puts you flat against the back of the ride because of the centrifugal force is so strong that all of you, just get stuck against the walls. Well, it's almost like that. It's like we're all in this together, and we can't envision a way that one person can get out. And by the way, we can all use our noggins and support each other to get out of this bucket, or to get
Right.
to another bucket, or to spread it around. So yeah, I feel like the resentment thing, I feel like I'm feeling you on that resentment thing, and how people kind of take that on their own to bring other people down, for sure.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that some of the comments that you just shared, of like, "Oh, you do so much. Why do you do that?" And that is, I remind myself when I hear things like that aimed towards me specifically that, that's their, their own lens, that it's I'm different than them, and they're putting their lens on me, which is not how they would act. They wouldn't live because I'm different than them. And so
Yeah.
they're commenting on my life that they're trying to apply to themselves, which is like trying to say, um, this orange is this banana. You can't.
Totally.
Like, you can't be like, the orange was like, I'm gonna put the banana peel on now and it's gonna work. And you're like, no, the banana peel is not gonna fit on the orange, right?
To be a banana.
I know. It doesn't have it that way. And so when I get those comments, I just am like, okay, that is their fear, that is their like worry that they're being left behind, that is their longing for what I'm doing, like, that has nothing to do with me. So I remind myself that often. But
Yeah.
I also realized there was a long time I was in a bucket with a bunch of crabs that were pulling me down. And
Well, what kind of a bucket? Like a work bucket or like a
I think at
personal
work
bucket?
and even personally, I wasn't in the
Mhm.
right bucket. And I think the telltale for me was, I actually felt lonely even when I was around my friends.
Ah,
Like, even around my
yeah.
people, like, were what
Mhm.
I thought my people were. And I did not understand that. And I was just like, wow, this is like, I had some friends that had left, and, so it was kind of like a transition, but still had people around. And I just felt, like, lonely. Like, I was like, "Huh,
Yeah.
I have people," but it felt very alone. I have no other word to describe it. And now, it as soon as I could get myself out of the bucket and find my appropriate bucket,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
shifted everything. And it's not because I have 50 million more friends now. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with, I am in the right bucket now. I'm surrounding myself with the right people. I'm not with the people that are like pulling me down, saying like, "Oh, what you're doing is not how we act," or that's like not that's so much more than what we typically do. Or, you're supposed to be this way when you're this person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm now surrounded by people who are like, "Go do whatever you is," and like, they're cheering you on. And I think that's part of it is, a lot, like, I certainly was in the bucket with the crabs pulling me down. In the corporate world, it was a really challenging experience, and this was quite a while ago. I mean, we're talking over 17 years ago,
Mhm.
that it was a very competitive environment
Bucket.
for females.
Yes. Mhm.
Right? And so that was
Yeah.
always hard. And thankfully, I did have some people around me, like, we got to work together, and, other awesome women, but in general, there was, like, a very cutthroat environment, even working with clients that were females, where it's
Yes.
very
Yes. That
cutthroat.
that
Oh
resonates
my
with me big time.
goodness,
Yes.
it was
Yes.
intense, and I remember it just being like, and for me, being the people pleaser, I'm like, "Why do they not just, like,
Why don't they just
like
like
me?"
me?
I know, I
I'm
was like,
here for
"I'm
the
just
client. I'm doing the best I
here."
can. this
I
is gonna be
know.
awesome. Oh yeah, no,
It makes them
I
look
feel you
so
on that.
good.
And I think that's actually an interesting point too, because then you have a differential, like a differential perspective. If someone's the
Mhm.
client and you're trying to impress them or you need to sell to them, gosh, I mean, I don't know how much we can
You
talk about
remember
this
that.
openly, but it really is. I feel like
Yeah.
women do this to each other,
It's so hard.
and that I feel like there is some science behind, because there is some straight biology behind that. But the idea that I'm showing up, and we all know we've been in those meetings where you show up and you meet your twin, and you're just like so psyched. You're like, I cannot even believe my luck, running into this, or you interview someone. I can think of people that I still work with now that I interviewed
Mhm.
however long
Yeah.
ago, and I'm like, I'm gonna champion you. Yes, like I can't wait to. And I just was never the person. This is not anything on me, but this is to talk about the crabs. What kind of crab are you? Because I was never the crab who wanted to put people down, even if they weren't qualified or they weren't ready to be in my bucket. I didn't just like throw them out of my bucket,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
out or pull them back down and then stomp on them, like that doesn't that doesn't really help because that doesn't get them into the right bucket either. Doesn't get them where they need to be. Sitting with me in the wrong bucket, stuck below me, way down there, you can't even see it. This is something I talk to people a lot about. Are you in the right position? Are you in the right job? Are you in the right neighborhood? Are you in the right friend group? All that stuff is based on what are the crabs that are around you, and are they elevating you? Are they allowing you to escape the bucket? Are they allowing you to look around at other buckets? Do they tell the fishermen, put the top on the bucket? We don't want to, no one can get out of here. Like make sure the top's on the bucket, sir. Like, no, like in really supportive, awesome environments, I think about our friendship is very much like an open crab bucket. right? If you want to jump out, Rach, you can totally jump out. And not only can you go, but I will give you my little pinchers and I will like push you up and I will like
Yeah.
dump you out over the side of the bucket because that's what it means or that's what it feels like to have people in your corner who are supporting you. In this vein, I can definitely think of sisters, families, girlfriends sometimes when they're really good friends, but they're not maybe mature enough or evolved enough to support each other this way. And again, like I think a lot of times you don't even realize that you're doing it, but you're kind of like, oh, why do you do so much? Oh, you don't have to do that. Like, why would you do all that? Oh, you're just fine at this job. Like, you don't need to, move to Chicago and take that other job and
You
disrupt your
know,
family, like on and on and on and
this
on.
is this is a really interesting one though. The example that you're touching on right here with like the girlfriend or is I think there's a fear of that, especially when it's like a close friend,
Yeah.
is that your friend is gonna outgrow you.
Yes.
Right, and
I think you're totally
that
right.
comes from a place of fear. That's not just like they're trying to wear your banana peel and they're an orange. That comes from a place of like, "This my friend is growing faster than I am. She is moving in ways that I can't keep up with, and so let me see if I can keep her here by reminding her that this is where we are," right? And
This is our
meanwhile, like,
bucket. Yeah,
"Yeah,
this is
this
the
is our
bucket.
bucket. This is the
Yeah.
bucket. Like, don't you don't wanna leave this bucket is really good right here. Don't leave the bucket," you know?
Uh-huh.
But I think that there is, there can be that scarcity mindset of like, "Oh, well, she's growing, she's changing, she's evolving, and that means that she won't be friends with me, and she will outgrow me." And so those comments that come after thinking that are the ones that like, "Why do you do so much? You don't need to do that. Like, tone it down. Like, just hang out. Like,
Yeah,
you don't
chill
need to like
out, relax.
sign up
Yeah.
for those training or, whatever. Like, why do you keep doing
Why
that?
are you
Like,
going back
just
to school? You don't need to do you don't need of
yeah,
course
you
I
don't
don't
need to
need to
do
do that. I
that.
don't need to do that. Why are you starting a business? Why do you have your own store? Why are why are you working there and da da da, why are you doing all these business model things? Like why it's like I don't know. I am. How about that's amazing, Great. Good on you. If that makes you happy, if that serves you, yeah, yeah. I think you're right. And maybe it's just a kind of a grasping, is
It
if you
is.
sense that someone is outgrowing you and
Yes,
they're moving and you're not. I could definitely see this in relationships. You can definitely
for
speak to this.
sure.
I
For sure.
100% can see this in relationships, and I have examples in my head, names will people who are nameless, who are in relationships where I feel like one person or the other is not keeping up. And instead of growing or instead of allowing that crab out of the bucket, they, like you're just saying, say, "This is our bucket. You damn well better stay in the bucket because this is the bucket. We agreed that this would be our bucket," right? This is
Yeah.
actually something that definitely will come up as you evolve through a relationship, right? Because we agreed
Yes.
that this is our bucket. And
Yeah.
we're committed. We made a commitment. We, said we would stay in this bucket, that this is the bucket we need and this is da 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 da, right? And so, God forbid you decide that you'd like to see what's outside of the bucket, just even to take a peek of what's outside of the bucket, because that's really scary and threatening to the other crab in the bucket who
Yeah.
doesn't want to look outside the bucket and doesn't, want to even, take a look around, much less jump out of the bucket, you know, and uh and take a look. So that's kind of a scary situation to be in too, because, what do you do on a practical note? If you're the crab trying to jump out of the bucket, how do you do that gracefully? How do you do that grateful, not greedy? Because, you could say that the greed is jumping out of the bucket. The greed is, it's not enough here, and I need to get out of this bucket, and we obviously would look at it differently, but I could certainly see someone viewing it that way, that, why do you need to do that? That's greed. But the greed for me is, coming from the other side.
Well, and it's a, I can say personally, I have been both. I have been both and
Okay.
I am the
You mean
person
both
that
crabs.
and I've been both crabs.
Okay.
I'm gonna own this one.
I love it.
I
That's
know
why
I'm
we're
gonna own
here,
something. I'm
Rach.
like, my
Bring it
heart's
on.
like, oh, do you want to really say this? I was like, I'm gonna own it. I'm gonna put it out there. So I am the one that like the crab that says like, okay, we agreed to this. I am like in this bucket. I'm never leaving this bucket. No
I
matter
get
what
this.
comes, like, I don't care if it's flooding in the bucket, I'm staying in the bucket, you know? And I certainly have done that in relationship. I could definitely say I've done that in my marriage, and I will just hunker down because
I see.
when I commit to something, and this is, I always say your greatest characteristic will also be your biggest flaw. And this
Correct.
is true for
I
me.
agree with
I
you.
am like, when I say I'm going to do something or when I commit to something, I commit fully. I am like
Mhm.
in 100%.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
that's also not so good when it's not working.
Right.
And I
Yeah, when you
still
don't have
stick around.
flexibility around that because you're
Yep.
so entrenched into, I said this, I committed to this,
I
this is
committed to
where
this.
it's
I don't
happening.
care
Yeah,
how long ago and who I was then. I committed
that's
to this.
right.
I'm going to keep my word. I view that as honor. I view that as like, I said I was going to stay in this through this. I said I was going to try this for 6 months. I said I was, and I will just do it. No matter like if the ship is sinking or the bucket's filling up, like I'll
That's
just
right.
keep going.
Yeah, you're like the quartet on the Titanic. You're like, it's okay.
Totally.
We said we were going to be here. We're going to play. We were going to play
Yeah.
till the ship
Yeah.
docks or
And
it
even
crashes, one or the other.
Yeah, and even when the ship's going down, I'm like, "Yep, nope, I still believe in the ship," and that
Yeah,
is,
I'm playing this tune. Yeah.
and I am trying to evolve past that for me because that's not taking care of me. That's not being able to step back and say, like, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to see things differently.
Hmm.
It's okay. Like, we evolve. We are different people every day. So the commitment I made 10 years ago, 12 years ago, 6 months ago was by someone who I'm no longer am today. And we as humans have the capacity to say that is not me
Change your
anymore.
mind.
And this
That's
doesn't,
right.
and that is uncomfortable because I am so that person. So I know I've been that crowd that has like sat there and said, nope, I'm hanging on to this. And then I've also been the crowd that's like, I'm getting out of the bucket. I am getting out of the
Yeah.
bucket. Stop putting me in the bucket. And like I like, and then I get out and then they put me right back in. And I'm like, I am out of this bucket. Like I know I've been that.
You're like one little crabby leg, like holding in the bucket. They
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah. I know.
There's your way back.
Exactly. And so I think, and I think if we all spent time looking at ourselves and then some of the situations we've been in, we probably have found we've been on both sides at some points. And so there is lessons here for me when we talk about this to think about. Because when I say that, I was like, I know I have done both. Like I have been both. And like when we talk about like the corporate world, I'm like, that totally is, I don't, that one I didn't play both sides of that because that's just not my realm. But when I hit these things like commitment to people and to relationships and to families and all of that stuff, I have gone past the point that is healthy for me. That means the bucket's filling up and I'm still sitting in the bucket. And that's the greedy, even though you think you're doing the honorable thing. And that's what you have to remember. Or I have to
Oh,
remember is
yeah.
I think I'm doing the honorable thing.
Yes.
And I'm not being greedy, but I'm actually being greedy to my own self, to who I
Yeah,
am.
you're almost like betraying yourself because
I
there's a way
am
out of this
betraying
bucket, and
myself.
someone else might be asking for the way out of this bucket, and you're like, "No, there's no out. There's no exit here. No,
Yeah.
no
Nope.
exit. No,
Yeah.
why?
And
Because
they're
we
like,
said we were going to build this bucket. This is a bucket, so there's no
yeah,
exit. No, I don't see any
no.
exit. I've looked
And
everywhere.
I'm gonna stay in here. I don't care if I have to drown in this bucket. I'm gonna stay in this bucket. Like, and that's not healthy. We know that. Like, I can't do that. That's not right for me. And then the other piece is like, there's no growth there.
Right.
So, being able to look at this and like really step back and look at like where have we been both sides and where have
Both
I been
sides.
both
Yeah, yeah,
sides
yeah. Which, yeah,
and
that's
where
it's such a good point.
and am I still doing that today? Like, and I hope, fingers crossed, both of them, that I'm not that same person. Like, I've worked really, really hard to move past that, to evolve past that. Um, and I also am very clear that, not that just me in the bucket now, but if I see someone trying to get out of the bucket, I don't want to be the person of being like, don't leave the bucket. Like, go
Right.
leave. If this bucket isn't right for you, get the heck out of
Get
here.
out.
Go on your
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah. Get out. Yes, yeah.
And I
Or
think
at least explore. Yeah, definitely take the chance to explore. You can always come back to the bucket. generally, I mean,
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I mean, it depends what we're talking about. There's so many ways, like, my head immediately goes, like, if you're in a committed long-term relationship, they wanna go leave the bucket. You're like, "Okay, well, if you're leaving the bucket," you know?
well, the leaving the bucket, I mean, to your point, like, having it was such a good point too to say this because I've now that you're saying it and bringing it out through you, of course, we're all calculating in our heads, wait, again, it's like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not that crab. I'm not who would be that crab? I'm not that crab," you know? Like, "Oh, shoot, she's describing something on that crab." So it's not like I'm gonna leave the relationship or not leave the relationship, it's, I'm not gonna make that move to Chicago because that's the wrong bucket. I'm
Yeah,
not going to, live in that neighborhood because that's the wrong bucket. I'm not
right,
going to send my kids to that school or to this school because that's the wrong bucket, right? You think
right,
about how many
right.
buckets there are when you're in a relationship that
True.
you may or may not have that flexibility, and wow, when you start thinking about that, I am sure I've been that crab, pulling that
Yes.
pulling that other crowd down or, my little kitty crabs, like, "Come on back, guys." Like, "Give me get back in the bucket."
I know. Yeah. Which is
That's we don't want you out there. We don't want you out exploring and doing all that stuff, you know? Yeah, because it's scary, and again, it's a control issue, I'm sure. I can acknowledge that on my end. I am sure it's about because, the anxiety for me comes when I sense a lack of a plan. I sense inability to kind of, see a path, and a path is controlled. A path is paved. It's predictable. It's all that stuff. So when you start, not being able to see that, some people are better in those nebulous situations than others. And I would say that, as spontaneous as I am, I think I'm not reckless and I'm not free a lot of the times in that, and I'm sure I have been this crowd. Definitely. Definitely. Like, this is the bucket. This is the bucket we're sitting in. I mean, you even think about with languages, with cultures, with, the ability to even interact with lots of different people. I mean, people have those buckets too, right? You have your cultural bucket, and it's like, "Oh, you're not gonna go out and get out of this bucket and go over to that other culture bucket. What are you talking about?" Like, because if you go out there, then that means what? I also have to change. I'm also now responsible because I know it's possible and I know it's totally normal and that bucket's totally fine over there. And I make him up in my head that this bucket is like all crazy and, it's all, like you said, filled with worms or whatever. And like that, no, I can't go to that bucket. But we do that completely unintentionally. But
Mhm.
by doing that, we're just, keeping ourselves small, keeping all our little crab friends small. Everyone's staying small, our little crab friends small. And by the way, the other bucket, they're small too because we're not just mixing around, kind of in the buckets or swirling around in life and just being open and flexible and available, to change, to growth, to different ways to looking at stuff, to perspective, to all the ways that we can keep elevating and moving on. And yeah, we just kind of like clamp down and throw the lid on that.
Mhm. It's true, it's true, and the good you alluded to this earlier about, especially when you have little crabs, like children, kids,
Yeah, little
and you're
crabs,
like, at what
little
point are
crabbies,
you, helping them
crabby
get out of the
patties.
bucket? I know, and you like, and I'm kind of straddling that realm because I just have just over a year left with my son, and I want him to get out of the bucket, but I don't want him to quite leave the bucket yet. But I wanted to practice getting out and getting back in. And, the other
Yeah.
night I was like, you should probably, it's a school night. Can you get home by this time? Even though I want him to start making some of those choices. And this is where, you know, these, um, I like, am I coming at that because I am trying to hold him back, or am I doing it for other reasons? Like, and really what is tied to
What's
that?
the intention? Yeah.
And,
What's that about?
and then when you talk to your kids and they have all these issues with their friends and like groups and stuff, and hearing about those, you're just like, wow. That
Totally.
like, when should they learn about the idea of like, there are friends that pull you down and friends that lift you up, and how do you, and not to bash the person, that person's just not ready to be the friend to lift you up. Like, they don't have the strength to lift you up yet, you
Yeah.
know, or
Yes.
maybe they never will. Like, how do you do
Right.
that without just like, saying that crab's a bad crab?
I know,
It's just like,
exactly. I mean, it's valid because, for me, what comes up is awareness. Awareness is how I do that. because I can only really have my perspective. I can only really truly have my lens. I can try and look in your lens. I can try and become a banana, but I'm just an orange. So I'm going to have that lens, and how I can, maybe start to evolve differently, or at least be aware of who's going to lift me up. First of all, is watch people, pay attention,
Mm.
watch behavior, watch what they say when I say, "Hey, I'm going to go back to nursing school," or "I'm in nursing school." Like, really, what the heck? Why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense. Why do you need to do that, Chris? Why would you do that? Blah, 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 right? Or versus the person who's like, "Holy cow, like that's awesome. What are you going to do with that?" I have no idea, but I'm just going to finish, and then I'm going to go from there. Uh, I think awareness of where I want to go. This is actually hitting me really hard right now. Um, I if I know I wanna leave the bucket, I have to be responsible for leaving the bucket. Like, I cannot blame the other crabbies for keeping me in the bucket when I'm
Mm.
capable of leaving the bucket, and we
True.
just we just detailed that, right? That crab is able to leave the bucket on that. If you have one crab in the bucket, that crab is able to leave. But when you put all these other crabs in the bucket, they all, pull on the crab and drag him down. Well, we're humans, we're not crabs. We don't have like these, prehistoric brains. We can actually think this all through. So if I know I'm capable of leaving the bucket, I want to leave the bucket, or there's growth on the other side of this bucket, on the inside of this bucket, I have a responsibility not to blame the other crabs, but to release myself from that bucket. And I don't have to, again, we've talked about this. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to justify it. I don't have to say, I kind of feel like I've outgrown this bucket. And no, I don't. I just have to leave the bucket. I just have to get out of the bucket, because that's, to your point, my responsibility to myself. That's the growth for me. And I can only be in this one little, grateful, not greedy world. I can only be responsible for myself. I can't be responsible or upset that all these other crabs are not ready to jump out of this bucket and go with me and do what I want to do, or make the progress I want to make, or, live in a different neighborhood, or whatever the heck I've got going on. And that, I feel like, is a big trap, a big crabby trap, almost like a lobster trap.
Yeah.
Of, oh, the gate's down, like that's it. We're stuck because we want to kind of figure things out, or we want to either kind of acquiesce just because we don't even realize what's happening. But
I don't know.
that's a little bit that's a little trap too, because the grateful is, I'm grateful that I have choice. I'm grateful that I have the capacity to leave this bucket if I want to. The greed is, oh, I don't have to leave this bucket because no one else is leaving that bucket. Right? Like, even though you want to, or you can, or whatever, the greed is, I'm just going to blame it on all these people. The reason I'm not leaving this bucket is because of them. But again, it's not about justifying. It's about do or do not. There is no try. Right? So it's like, you're either going to leave the bucket or you're not going to leave the bucket, but we don't need all the explanations of why you're in the bucket or out of the bucket. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. What we care about is, are you growing? Are you living your best self? Are you in the state of potential? And that potential often is outside of the bucket, especially if you recognize that there's a bucket that you're, trapped. If
Yeah.
you literally are trapped in a bucket, if you're about
Yeah.
to be crab soup, you're about to be with a mallet on you, I'd say get out of that bucket, right? But if we just have a lot of pull to keep us in that bucket for a myriad of reasons.
Well, and the other thing, the interesting thing is, like, if you use it, if you know you're in the bucket, sometimes you might, if you've been in that bucket so long, you might just think that that is it. That's all you have.
Normal.
This
Yeah,
world. This is it.
totally.
And then your friends who we now are these people are pulling you down. They might actually be thinking they're protecting you, because they're
Yes.
like, you
Oh, such
don't
a
want to
good
go
point.
out there. The last
Such a
person that
good
went out
point.
there, like, never came back, would probably went off and, like, got chewed up or ate by the dog or whatever.
Yeah, which
Stay in the
totally could
bucket.
be.
Stay in the
This is such
bucket,
a good
right?
point. Yes.
And
You don't know
so,
what's out there. There's no guarantees, though. That's true.
there is no guarantees. And so some of it might be done from that, especially when we're talking about family dynamics and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
there's like that I want to protect you bit.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I don't feel like that is necessarily what we want. But that is that part of it where people think that, well, she clearly doesn't know well enough, so I'm going to protect her. And I'm always like, one of my big things is like, I never asked you to make choices for me, make my decisions, choose these things. I've never asked, and that drives me insane
Yeah,
when
I
someone
am with you
decides
on
something
that.
for
Yeah,
me.
I have
It's like,
it's one of my
talk
trigger
about like,
points too. Yeah,
yeah, like
I always
0
say,
to
I mean, I don't know,
60.
maybe we were both oppressed the same way, but I always say that. Like, they're like, "Well, you can just decide, I guess." And I was like, "Of course I can. I'm an adult. I'm an adult. I can make whatever choice I want, you know? That's
Right.
that's not
Yeah.
illegal, right? So, and even that I can make a choice. I just have to pay the consequences, but yeah, it's not I'm resonating with you big time on that, right? I'm not trying to be your crab. I'm just trying to be my own little crab. And even though I'm just a crab, I'm still my own crab. I still only have
Right.
one crabby life, you know? Like I want to live it and I want to
Fabulous.
be able to do what I want with my little pinchers.
Grateful,
And
not
maybe
greedy,
they'll get
crabby
clawed
life.
off by the dog. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I won't know that if I don't get out there. I think what's coming up for me too is, I have teenagers and I have teenage girls and boys. What I find more consistent is the teenage girls are more of the crabs in the bucket. This is my experience. This is completely anecdotal, insert for entertainment purposes only right here. I have no idea. I'm not a
Right.
scientist. I'm not a behavioral specialist, but I do have lots of children, and I observe them quite astutely and quite closely. And my experience, both as a woman or a girl growing up, and now watching my teenage girls, is that both sides. There's both sides. The girls will be more supportive. The girls who are supportive will be way more supportive than the counterparts of my male, proxies. And but the girls who are not supportive will be
Mm.
devastatingly unsupportive, like
Yes.
devastatingly unsupportive, and almost to the point of sabotage. Or I should say, not even almost, to the point of sabotage. And that could be in the way that someone is dressed, that they have different clothes than they do, that they have access to, I don't know, maybe your mom's a makeup artist or something like that, and you're super jelly about that. Maybe you have like I said, clothes that you wear, maybe you can go to concerts that they can't, whatever it is, or you're dating this guy, it's high school. So please, like you're dating this guy or that guy, right? It's this whole big jealousy swirl. And rather than just being like, oh, that's great, we always talk about this, you know, again, any woman who's raised in the US has a seventh or eighth grade story. All of us do. Every single one. There is no, and your story could be you're out of the crab thing and you're, shaming the crabs who are stuck in there. That could be your story. Your story could
Yes.
be, I was one of the crabs pulling down. Your story could be I was one of the crabs trying to get out. Your story could be like I didn't even know I was a crab and I was just stuck in this little group and I was just sitting there in the middle. I mean, we all have a story. So
Mm.
that I think lives in our psyche a little bit when it comes to this peer group pull, and we might even replicate that in our later life and our older life until we kind of can start to see it. And like I said before, what comes up for me in this conversation so much is awareness. What is going on? At which crab am I? And am I being held back? Do I have the people around me who can, push me forward? I definitely have I have some, what would I say? I have not currently in this moment, but I have over the course of time had frenemies, and my daughters have had frenemies. And uh, that's that's important thing to recognize that those are the crabs in the bucket. Those are the extra crabs that are pulling you back. Frenemies, taciturn, inconsistent, not necessarily supportive, maybe when
Mm-mm.
they, want to be or whatever, right? So recognizing that that your peer group, whoever you choose to have around you, is so, so important. And then finding those people, and how do we know that we're being, and mothers, hate to bash on us, Rach, but it's whether it's you as a mother or your mother as a mother, right? Or your grandmother as a mother. We also know, like through experience and through anecdotal evidence, empirically and otherwise, that many of us have experience in our families and in our parents and in our the mother daughter situation, which is there's a lot of moms in the bottom of that bucket. I have to say it. There's a lot of the moms, and recognizing if you're either with one of those moms or you are one of those moms, that there might be an opportunity for some self-reflection and some perspective shifts in that situation too.
Yeah, you're very, very right. It's interesting as we start identifying these unique places where these kind of experiences of the crab situation, whether it's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
moms or
The life of the
seventh and
crab.
eighth, if seventh and eighth grade, or the corporate world for females, or relationships, like all of those, like this message keeps coming up, or this like pattern comes up, and you said, like, are we kind of reliving that? And perhaps we are, until we change, until we do it differently. And once you realize that the bucket's really not a barrier, you can leave the bucket at any time. It's no big deal. But until you
Yes.
like have that knowledge, it becomes, I'm sure, a pattern, which is probably that friend of ours that's doing this is still in the seventh, eighth grade bucket thinking this is the only way, right?
Right,
This is
exactly.
how we go. This is all I
Yes.
have. This is the only experience I have. I'm trying to try it again and see if I could get the results I want again, that type of thing. And so the pattern of it is certainly interesting. And I'm curious though, at what age does that pattern actually go away?
Right,
Like,
yeah, I don't think it's age though, Rach. I think it's just emotional maturity and awareness, and when you realize that the right people are not those that are pulling you down. The right people for you
yeah,
are those that are
true.
pushing you out of that crab bucket, and that's awareness. It's not age for me, it's not age driven. It's awareness driven. I have, experience with people across all ages, and someone could be 35 and still not getting it, and someone could be 17 and very aware.
True. I completely agree with that. It's not age, but there's something that happens, and I don't know what age it is, but when, I remember with my grandmother when she started getting older, she said whatever she wanted,
Oh,
like
yes.
all filters off, right?
These are the crabs, these are the mom crabs in the bucket, I'm telling you. They're
Yeah,
everywhere.
totally. And so I'm like, at what age does that happen?
I see
Where
what you're
like you
saying.
just
Yeah.
don't care anymore and you're like, screw that. I'm not, and they just like the filter is gone. Everything just comes out. And I was like, does that happen overnight? Is that a certain age? Does it flip? Like, when does that happen? That's what I meant with age.
Yes, I
Because there is
understand, yeah,
something
okay.
for a lot of people as they get older, and they get to that, later in life, that it's just like, life's short. I don't have to do anything anymore kind of mentality. Like, I can be whatever I want, say whatever I want. No one's gonna bat an eye on it because 'cause I'm 80 now, right? And I can wear the
Yeah,
most
but in that
ridiculous thing or
there's 2
whatever.
ways about that though too. There's the, "I'm saying this because I can say whatever I want," and then I'm also saying this because I can say whatever I want. So, in doing so, you might be, downplaying someone, you might be imposing your
True.
views on them, you might be making them feel
True.
guilty for their growth or for their, like I said before, it's like, "Oh, who does she think she is?" Like, "Oh, who
Right.
are you?" Like, "Oh, you're all fancy pants? Oh, you're too good for us?" I mean, we've all heard this. "Oh, we're not good enough for you anymore," and then you leave that conversation and you feel worse. You feel small. You've been crabbed.
Mhm.
Like you've been crabbed. You have to understand that and see it and make that physical change behaviorally, not to be surrounded, to recognize that dynamic when you're being crabbed and you're, stuck in the crab bucket, recognize it and then see the exit strategy, see the ways out, or limit your the time that you're spending, your exposure to certain people, and just becoming aware of that crab bucket dynamic that you're sitting in.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a piece of that too that, as you said earlier, to own it yourself, right?
Yeah.
The fact that someone made me feel small. It's like, no one made you feel small. You chose to make yourself small at that moment.
Uh-huh.
You don't, no one can make anybody feel a certain way. Our emotions are ours to feel and experience. And so that's where, this is where the crab bucket even gets more interesting, because you're like,
Yeah.
we are choosing to be, a part of that cycle, because we could
Yeah.
change that at any point. And that's where, we go back, always a lot of our conversations go back to this, is the power of choice, like choosing your response, right?
I
Choosing
think
it,
it's a lot, yeah,
choosing
I think it's
how
a
you
lot of the
feel.
conversation. It's like you said, the power of choice, the self-awareness, the boundary setting of
Mhm.
limiting your exposure to unsupportive people, your ability to find new settings to expose yourself to, other like-minded people, whatever that, find a new bucket. And then when you are in that new bucket, making sure that you don't become one of the another time the crab trying to escape, or again, don't become the crab who's pulling others down in a new bucket.
Black.
That you just like kind of change, because I think the whole process of growth. We talked about this with the lobster. It's scary.
Yeah.
All you're trying to do is be a little lobster, get bigger, because that's what your DNA is telling you to do. And if this is in your DNA and this is what you're being called to do and you're doing it, and then you feel the pull because so many would say, like, it's lonely growing, like, it's hard to grow,
Yeah.
it's so much easier just to, like, sit there in the comfort of the bucket, even if you're gonna, become, beyond that whole crab bake thing that's
Right.
going on. You don't know, fine, you're ignorant and happy, but yeah, like, just appreciating that it's a scary process, and it's much easier to just, not go through it per se, but if you don't, to our lobster thing, you're just gonna be sitting out there swimming around in the ocean. You have to keep evolving, so you can decide how you wanna do it, but so much of the opportunity that you have, I think the focus for me as we're having this conversation is not so much like it is, "What about me? What about me?" But I feel like if it were, "What about everyone else?" I always said that I feel in my heart of hearts that I'm a very solid cheerleader for people. Like, I'm really genuinely happy for people when something good happens to them, or they're, when they
Mhm.
something moves along, or they get that job, or I can support them, I can bring out their great qualities, because everybody has something, fantastic about them, right? So to me, the grateful, not greedy concept is that's about celebrating others. That's the grateful. Grateful that there are other people who can show me by example that this is possible. Not greedy that I'm not doing it right now. Not greedy that I need to pull them down. Grateful that I can see the way, that I can see the possibility through other people, and not just, and do that in like a self-reflective way, not just, being threatened by other people, but being amazed by other people because they're showing me the avenues to growth. And that is, like, a tricky thing to do, but it's also a massive path to being aware and figuring out where you are in this crab bucket.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. It's the crab bucket is a process. It doesn't
Yes,
happen overnight,
totally.
right? And
Yeah,
I think we get exposed to it over and over in different situations, and then over time we're like, okay, now I know this game. I'm familiar with this bucket. And and then you just like, it just becomes part of the I've been here before, I know exactly what to do now situation. And that's helpful because like you said, when you grow, it's uncomfortable. It is uncomfortable because it's new and we
yeah,
haven't experienced that. And as humans, we don't like uncertainty. We don't like unknown in general. We don't because that is risky. But then once we get comfortable, we're like, oh, look, here we are in the bucket again. No big deal. I've been here before, and
yeah,
that's where, that stuff can change, for each of us, and we can have a different experience. And that's what is exciting about this is we all were in the buckets at 7th and 8th grade as girls, right?
yes, definitely.
And I
Mhm.
am not that person anymore. So then, now as we look at it, it's like, you know, when I hit the bucket again, it's not coming from fear. And I think that's the grateful not greedy part of this conversation is I know I've been on both sides of this bucket before.
Yes,
And I also know that I have the tools of like how having to assess the bucket, having to assess my situation, and knowing that like I know there's a whole other world outside this bucket. And I know exactly it's like who's in the bus, who's on the bus with you, like who's in the bucket with you,
yes,
are these the people you
yes.
want to be with, and is this the what you want to surround yourself with, and that makes a huge difference. And so then all of a sudden the bucket becomes the party. And that's where I want to
Yeah.
be
Oh, yeah. Such a good
in the
point.
party bucket.
Exactly.
And I feel like uh, I've finally gotten myself to that place, to the party bucket. And those are the ones that like, it's like crowd, like at concerts, like the surfing, the crowd surfing. And like, that's what
Yeah.
we're doing. The crab in my party crab bucket, the crabs are all you're surfing on top of them and they're lifting you out
Yeah.
and you're
Exactly.
coming
And if
back,
anyone wants to leave, they're welcome to leave. They can always,
Yeah.
surf away. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Come on back when you're ready to do some more. And that's what's exciting about this evolution is it's there's a lot of potential in there. A lot of potential for each of us.
Yeah. I agree.
We're ready.
I think the important part that you said in there too was about there's a bucket. You might not be able to have a say in the bucket that you're in, right? You might not be able to have a say. You can't control whatever bucket you might be born into or
Mhm.
worked into or friend grouped into or neighborhooded into. Sometimes you can't control that bucket, but you can control whether you stay in that bucket, whether you put boundaries around that bucket, whether you build yourself a little moat around that bucket, whatever you can control your perspective and your relationship and your relationship to that bucket, right? You can surround yourself with people who are supportive to you. And again, that like self awareness thing is so key in here. It just like keeps kind of hitting me in the face to really do. I think after this pod, what I'm going to be looking at is even in my own personal life crab story is kind of auditing my circle. Just even in just noticing, because I do have situations, and I know I've talked to you about this. I have situations where I'm like, I I'm kind of friends with this person, but I don't necessarily trust that they're my biggest supporter or a consistent supporter or that they're going to be championing me. They might be like indirectly cutting me down or kind of making little snide comments that aren't that you don't really you're guessing, is that are you supporting? Are you really meaning that? Like, some people have like sarcasm that's a little too much. And I don't wanna sit there and be guessing that when I'm in situations. I just wanna know in my heart of hearts that that person has, my greatest, like, benefits at heart. Like, they want the best for me, and I want the best for them. So I think I'm gonna do a little bit of just an internal audit, if you will. And because that just gives me a chance to be the crab, whatever crab I wanna be. And I wanna be able to choose the crab that I wanna be. And I'm even thinking about recording this and thinking about even highlighting those friends of mine. I'm gonna send it to them, when we're done recording this and send them this little podcast saying, "Thank you for being, one of my mother crab that helped me jump out of the bucket," because there are definitely people in my life who are, and I'm sure we can all say it's just worth doing an audit, right? If we do an
Mhm.
audit and we can kind of say, yes, you want to deal with the people that you aren't supporting you, but you also want to acknowledge and be so grateful for the people who are supporting you, right? And I'm thinking this podcast is almost like, thank you for being my crab not in the bucket. The crab who was willing to put your pinchers together when I got out of the bucket and really helped me elevate because that's just as valuable as anything else in this conversation to me and thinking
Mhm.
about it is to how those people show up for me, how incredible it is to have people like that, um, in our lives, not even necessarily realizing it unless we, take a moment like I am right now.
It's true. It's true. I mean, you can like you said, like look at the ones that you're like, oh, I don't know if that crab is really the one that's going to help lift me up. But
Yeah.
there are plenty I can just even sitting here. I'm like, wow, I'm just feeling this like wave of gratitude for the ones that have lifted me, for the ones that continue to like support and that want me to get out of the bucket and are encouraging me, even if that means that I'm going to be further away from them and might not be around.
That's right.
There's
Yeah.
encouragement in every possible way, and that is, um, incredible. So powerful. So you're right. It's a beautiful way of looking at that, Chris, and I think I will do that internal audit and take a moment to share my gratitude with those people in my life because that's a huge thing.
Yeah, I'm totally with you
Huge.
on that. So, yeah, I think that's probably I don't know if we could say it any better than that, honestly.
No,
It's probably a
I
good
think
place
that's
to
good.
go.
That's grateful,
Stop
not
crabbing.
greedy.
Stop the crabs because that is the internal audit. And then, for me, it's the recognition of who in my life could say that about me, right? Who am I showing up
Mhm,
for? Who am I
mhm,
being the crab on the other side who's not only like, supporting him if I'm inside, but if I'm outside, just grabbing the pincher and, pulling him out and
right.
who am I really, putting that great support for too, because that is
Yeah,
what it's all about. That's the grateful that we have these opportunities in our life to have people. So
true.
yeah, I'm done. I'm gonna go to Maryland. I am going to eat so many of these crabs that have been keeping me down. I'm gonna put a
Enjoy.
mallet to all of them, Rach. I just gotta all
Oh,
the
love it.
frustrations going into that mallet. I got my old base
Yep,
seasoning all out. I'm like, these crabs are gone, done. I'm like,
awesome.
yeah,
Yes.
symbolically, yeah, like clearing out my crab non-supporters, my crab haters.
There you go. I love it. I love it. We'll have an amazing time. Thanks for making the time to have this
I
conversation.
know. It's like it's so ironic that you said that to me. So yes. Having said that, again, thanks again for everyone for listening, for staying in with us. Please always like, subscribe, whatever you can do to be our little crowd supporters, to be the ones pushing us out of the bucket because we do get so much and we are able to continue to bring you this content because of your support. And we want to thank you very much for being our crabs, pushing us out, keeping us out of the bucket. And with that, I will say this has been, is, and forever will be the Grateful Not Greedy podcast. And aloha, Rach.
Aloha, Chris.